Hello, good morning. Welcome back to our Wednesdays live chat here on the Cognition Facebook page. I'm Mei-Ling Chan, and I'm really excited to be bringing on Richard Ellenson to join us. Those of us that know him know that he's been in the industry for many years, helping to create products and to really shine a light on the Cerebral Palsy Foundation. So let's bring Richard on. Here we go. There you go. Wonderful.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks for
Thank you,
having me.
Richard. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course.
All right, let me just get our names up here so everyone knows who we are.
Okay. And actually, while you're doing that, everyone, just to begin, since you're here, thought we would give you a little something extra. So for the first person, Mei-Ling is going to put this information in the chat. But for those of you who email me at richarde@talksuite.com, that's talk-suite.com, with the subject line of cognition, spelled the correct way. The first person who does that will get a code for a free copy of TalkSuite. And then every 10th person, up to 10 total people, whether you're live or whether this is recorded, we'll get another copy of that. So just wanted to do a little something special for a special day.
Awesome. So I'm actually typing this in now. So send him an email with the subject cognition.
Yep. And again, just to me personally, Richard E. at talk-suite.com. And we'll be talking.
What will they receive, Richard?
Excuse me?
What will they receive?
They will receive, you'll get a email back with a code for a free copy of TalkSuite, and you just put that into your app store and you'll get a free copy. And that's a $200 value. So there you go.
Thank you. Okay.
Communication is invaluable, as we all know.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Richard. And that actually starts us off really well. Let's find out, how did you get involved in this space and what you've been doing all this time?
Sure. So I was an advertising guy. I spent my life at a lot of the big agencies. Many of you know I wrote the tagline, "It's not TV, it's HBO." I worked for American Express, for McDonald's, did a lot of fun stuff for Cointreau, came up with the line "Be Controversial," and Remy Martin and things like that. And my son was born now, it'll be 23 years in just a few days. And he was born, and at 6 months we found out he had cerebral palsy. And when he was 5, we went and met with the DOE to talk about him getting into kindergarten. And he was sitting there, and they were giving him a typical test with, movable parts and, manipulables. And of course, he couldn't do that. Tom is nonverbal, and he has a lot of spastic diplegia and also fluctuating tone. And they said to him, they gave him this test like, dog is to doghouse as blank as to nest. Mm. And, he didn't have language and verbal skills at that point. And the woman said, well, clearly he's just staring off into the distance and doesn't really understand this. And I looked at my wife, and I looked at Tom, and I looked at where he was staring. And I said to the woman, if you were more observant, you'd see he's staring at a bird in your wallpaper. Mm. And he's absolutely appropriate for kindergarten. Wow. And I guess that was the first time that I realized how complex communication was going to be for someone who was going to do it differently. And when they said, well, we can't get him to kindergarten, I, happened to run into Mayor Bloomberg. And so he set us up with the Department of Ed. So we started a whole new school program. I literally went around the city to preschools, meeting with people, and helped start a program. And Tom ended up on the front cover of the Sunday New York Times magazine with a line which said, "Is there room in the class for Thomas?"
Wow.
And it was amazing. And, when it came out, I knew it was going to be a front page story. Thought to myself, and indeed, 23 years later, still fighting the good fight. Tom is now a sophomore at SUNY Purchase, majoring in arts management and theater.
Wow.
He is a performer. He's had an off-Broadway one-man show called "It Is What It Is" that he wrote with a good friend of his and performed, and won a thing called the One Festival with it. And, he is a triumph. But of course, he has the issues that everyone has when you have disability, when the rest of the world just has a hard time connecting with you, hard time anticipating all the abilities you have. And so when Tom was in kindergarten and he was using a speech device, and back then they were as difficult as they were helpful, it created as many barriers as it built bridges. I said to myself, this world has so many great special ed teachers, so many great SLPs, so many great OTs and PTs. What it needs is an ad guy. What it needs is someone who can say, how do we change the brand of disabilities? How do we stop worrying about only what the people with disabilities can manage, but how do we deal with the other people and their perceptions of people with disabilities? And, that really has been my life's work for, 17 years now, trying to work in augmentative communication, working with foundations. I've been on the boards of 2 NIH groups, on the advisory boards. I've been on the board of ATIA, of CSUN, Cal State Northridge. And, the message that I've always shared with people is, the pedagogy, things like that. But there was this one wonderful day when I was at a conference thinking like, I'm with all these SLPs, what do I know? Mm-hmm. And then I said to myself, I'm an advertising guy. What I know about communication is different, but what I know about communication is no less valid than what everybody else is doing. And again, that's where it all began.
Beautiful. Richard, this brings up so many great segues to conversation here. But one of the things I wanted to point out is, 17 years ago, 20 years ago, we still had this like God complex about doctors and education and that they know more than us. And you are definitely a pioneer in this area of advocacy. And that's a word that is so mainstream now. We're using it all the time as people are advocates. Actually, people with disabilities are advocates for themselves. But for you to start at that kindergarten level, and saying, my child has a place here, and we're going to educate the system, right, on his possibilities and his opportunities. It's so beautiful. It definitely rolls right into where you're joining me as an exceptional leader and a co-author of my next book, Becoming an Exceptional Leader, because it's taking people like yourself who are taking those skills, like you're saying, of advertising and marketing, and bringing it into the world of disabilities. And that's what we've needed all these years. It's wonderful. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on our Cognition Facebook Live and educating us. That actually brings me to the next question, which is really what's new? I know that you've been you've been in the industry doing so many things. So right now, 2020, in the fall, what's new in your life?
Well, I've been out at our house for 6.5 months. That's new. I think that's everyone else is sharing that little bit of newness, and it's really allowed us to think a little bit harder about everything in the world. But if you ask me what's new, again, when you're an advertising professional and you look at communication, it's interesting because you use the word advocacy. You know what? Advocacy is what goes out at you. You advocate for somebody. But what comes back, for to be a change agent? You know what I mean? Because advocates who just rant and rail and do stuff, but you can't change things. To change, you need to build collaboration. You need to build coalitions of people. There's a group in New York City, the Arise Coalition, which, I helped brand, which is Action for Reform in Special Education, which brings together all of the people. And I remember one day we were at a meeting with the DOE, and I said to them, someone was like, rah, rah, rah. And I said, well, listen, you don't have 20 people here. You have the representatives of over 100,000 kids in New York City. That's really who's at this table. And it really did change the conversation. So we need to remember that what we're doing is not only for us, not only for the kids, not only for people who use Allcom, people with disabilities. It's really to change the perceptions outside. Again, and think about it. People who are heavy are often thought of as not being as, vital, which is crazy. People who are quiet are thought of as not having as much to say. Our world is so full of misperceptions, never more than today. And so, trying to be a change agent is what is really so important to me. And what's new is that the social media and the vast digital resources we have give us all an ability to change that a little bit and to work a little bit harder to make some of those changes. I also recently, I had come up with the Tango about 12 years ago. It was, we actually built a camera into an Allcom device before the iPhone came out, which was amazing. Back in that day, it was really about devices. But think about that. A device was this weird piece of technology you used. Now it's an iPad. or something that looks like an iPad, and everyone knows how to use it. And maybe we don't realize, but think of the power of the grid-based system of foldering as being just part of everyone's vernacular, and how much easier it's been made to adopt that. I was at a meeting at AAA where somebody said you have to be certified to be an SLP and to adapt a device and everything. That's the most damaging thing I have ever heard. To think that only an SLP can see that a child needs a device, that you need to have, and it's not just an SLP, you had to be an accredited SLP. That's outrageous. To think that someone who's not going to have enough time, who you don't have enough of these people, can think better than a parent who lives with their child every day. I can tell you, I've met so many parents, they might not know as much about the tools, but with the deep resources that you have today, with all the exposure, they know their child. And we need to advocate to make those kind of changes. But, with TalkSuite, which is, what I come out with, which brings a lot of the thinking of the tango together, we've come up with a great new phrase called anticipatory communication. I'm going to use that one more time. Anticipatory communication. Sherlock Holmes said, that, when you've eliminated the impossible, what's ever left, no matter how improbable, is going to be the truth. And you know what? We really have not seen the success that we wanted to see in this world, have we? We see a kid just saying hello, or people talk about hearing a kid say, I love you for the first time. You can say, I love you with your eyes, man. You don't need to use words for that. With a hug, with a smile. We need to say the more complicated things to people who aren't used to AAC, and then we need to engage them. And anticipatory communication takes the fact that right now, we only have two ways to speak. You can use step-by-step stories, which are fast and great and easy, but you can't get out of them. If someone asks you a question, you're lost. Or you can use word-by-word communication, which lets you say, depending on your literacy, anything in the world, accepting that it's slow. And even the most caring people don't always have the time or the willingness to take someone who speaks so slowly. But you know what, Mei-Ling? 80% of what we're going to say, we already know we're going to say. You and I came to this meeting, this great, moment you set up. We know some of the things you want to cover. When you go on a date, if it's a first date, you know what stories you want to tell. If it's a third date, you know the stories you tell. When you have a bad day at work, you can't wait to get home to tell someone what happened. Why do we force people to wait for someone with AuCom to build those word by word when you can pre-store them and get engaged in the moment? We can anticipate so much of what we're going to say. And so what's new in TalkSuite, there's great core columns, which are really easy to use. There's great storytelling, which you tell with just one button, but there are jokes, there are talk topics, there are photo albums, there are all sorts of different kinds of communication that you can use in different moments. There's your favorite list. There's a great section called My Life, because if you said to me, Richard, who are you? Sure. I can tell you just what I'm going to say.
Exactly. Historical, biological information, all of that is so important. That actually brings me to what's next, rate enhancement. And that's what we talk a lot about at Cognition is being able to communicate these really important messages quicker. And so it sounds like that's the space that you are also working in.
It's interesting. We're both after the same goal, and we're going down two parallel paths. It's funny. I once did a fun video where I pretended to have access to thought-to-speech output, and I did a little video with my son. I'll send a link to it later. And I said, hey Tom, how you doing? He goes, I'm doing great. Did you have a nice day? You have a voice off camera making it look like Tom. I'm having fun. And then you go, what's happening in your social life? And the voice goes, is he going to stop talking ever? And then I said, are you doing okay? And he goes, my dad is such a jerk. When you have thought to speech, it's not only what you say, it's what you're not going to hear. So what anticipatory communication is doing is, until we have thought to speech, until we have the way to do that more quickly, we're trying to stack the deck a little bit, because the truth is, for written communication, the difference between 8 words a minute and 24 words a minute is seismic. You can work 3 times faster. That's amazing. But in verbal communication, let me know when you hit 80.
Right.
Because I'm talking at 180 and most people are talking at 150. I'm from New York.
I
Sorry
was
about
going
that.
to say we're from the East and we go faster.
Yeah,
And we've had our
exactly.
coffee.
Exactly. But learning to get words out more quickly is important. Learning to get what you want out more quickly, learning to get your stories out more quickly, learning to have people get interest in you is what's really cool. Think of all the junk we read in things like People magazine about the lives of people we're interested in. Think of how people wait outside of a concert to meet the guy who was on stage. People will wait if they're interested. But that first moment when you get to make your first impression, and you know the tagline, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. If your first impression is, I don't know what he's saying and I don't have time to wait, you got some issues. If you can take that moment and really find that dense, wonderful, soulful spirit of the individual in it,
Beautiful.
relationships, you're not just building sentences, you're building relationships, engagement, connection. Connection is what communication is about.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Richard. What a wonderful way to end your interview, because I think it's one of those taglines. You know, it's a Richard Ellenson tagline.
Well, I'm glad to know I can trademark something.
Thank
And
you.
thank
Thank
you
you for
so much,
joining us,
Mailing.
Richard. And I'm just going to remind everyone that Richard is offering a free copy of the new TalkSuite app. And you just have to email him. If you look in the comments, it's richarde@talksuite.com with the subject line cognition. Thanks, Richard, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Yes, those are all my original Beatle albums. Thank you,
Oh
everybody.
yes, I'm sorry. I did get the chance to talk to you beforehand. I forgot to bring it up. So yes, for everyone watching, he
No.
actually set this up specifically for us to treat us.
Thanks so much, Mailing. Great seeing you.
Okay, thank you. Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone. Thanks for listening.
Ah, so wonderful. Thank you everyone for joining us for another one of our fantastic Wednesdays with an expert on the cognition, what's new, what's next, and accessibility. And this has been brought to you by the Speak Pros app, offering intuitive interface that allows people to express themselves using face and eye tracking technology on the iPad. If you're interested in finding out more, you can contact me directly or you can go to speakpros.com. Thanks so much for joining us and see you next week.